Hi, everybody. Welcome to Employee Time Tracking and Analytics, a 101 for managers, hosted by Beebole and presented by Suzanne Lucas. My name is Helen. I work in marketing at Beebole, and I'm just going to start with a short introduction as some people continue to join us. I know that some of you are already Beebole users and that others may not be familiar with us yet, so let me just tell you a little bit about us. Basically, for the last 10, almost 11 years, Beebole has been offering employee time tracking software for all types of companies. And in that time, we've worked with businesses of many sizes from different sectors, and each of them really with unique time tracking needs. Naturally, we've acquired quite a bit of knowledge about best practices during that time. And we thought that a webinar, particularly with the help of an expert like Suzanne, would be a great way to share some of this information. And we're actually going to be continuing a series of webinars in the coming months on workforce management in general. So if it's something that interests you, then definitely stay tuned, and we'll be announcing more webinars in the future. So what we really wanted this particular webinar to be about is we want it to be relevant for everybody, whether you use Beebole or another tool, or if you use no tool at all, whether you're new to time tracking or if you've been doing it for years. We really think that you're going to be able to get some good insights over this next hour, give or take. So feel free to send us written questions throughout the webinar via the GoToWebinar menu. There's a little questions module in there that should appear, I believe, on the right-hand side, and we'll get to them at the end. If your questions are related to Beebole specifically as a tool, feel free to go ahead and send them, and we'll probably be answering those written either here or we'll get in touch with you after the webinar. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Suzanne. Suzanne is a human resources expert. She has more than a decade of experience in corporate HR, and then she moved on to become a full-time writer and a speaker, and she now runs a really popular blog, The Evil HR Lady, that many of you are probably familiar with. So Suzanne, you can go ahead and take it away whenever you're ready.
Great. I am so excited to be here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, HR plus data. I mean, how much more exciting can we possibly get? But I want to tell a little story. I came home from an HR conference and I dumped my bag of swag on the kitchen table. And my husband, who is a statistician and a consultant, he has absolutely nothing to do with human resources. I mean, other than doing performance appraisals and things like that. But looked at my swag, picked something up and says, "Oh, I hate them." And I said, "Why on earth do you hate them?" After all, I mean, it was actually a water bottle and it was really cool. And he just said, "Time tracking." And I said, "Oh, of course." As a consultant, he has to track all of his hours for billing purposes, which of course means he uses time tracking software and he hates it. And he's not the only one. Your employees may well hate time tracking as well. But it's important to know what your people are doing. Back in the good old days, when everybody either worked on a farm or in a factory, there was a real product at the end of the day. And you could count and figure out how productive you were. And it was really easy to see if this group of employees was more productive than that group of employees, or if the night shift was better than the day shift, or whatever. And if this was a good year or a bad year, you just add up your widgets and there you go. And so we didn't need to worry so much about productivity during the day and things like that, because it was easy to tell just how productive everyone was. But knowledge workers are different. How do you know if your knowledge workers are being productive? You may not even know whether what they did today had a positive or a negative impact on the business for 6 months or even more. If they're sitting down with a client meeting, this might be the first meeting And it might be a pitching meeting, and it may take 6 months of back and forth before this company decides whether or not they're going to award a contract. Now we say, yay, we're productive and we've done all this great stuff when we get the contract, but the reality is that there was a lot of work going on before to get that. So it can be really difficult to say whether this was a productive use of our time or not. And so this is somehow one way that time tracking allows you to know. It allows you to look back at what people did in the past and what productivity you had with that, how things played out for you. It's really important today, especially in tight labor markets. We have to be streamlined. We can't have extra people hanging out watching YouTube videos. We can't afford it, and we can't hire new workers to replace them. So it's really important that we be productive in our work. And so there are several things that time tracking allows you to know. The first is where your time sucks are. Every business has time sucks. Things that are just a huge waste of time, and it's all going to be different. And it can be different in different departments and different managers. You know, if you have a manager that wants to have a daily update meeting with the whole team from 8 to 9 o'clock every day, that's likely a very large time suck. You may have a manager that wants you to send documentation on every phone call that you make. That may be a huge time suck. It may also be very important. For instance, in pharmacies, one of the reasons that pharmacies work well is that the pharmacists put information into the computer for everything that they do so that the next pharmacist that comes on shift knows exactly what's going on. So for me, a writer and a human resources person, to document every phone call is a time suck. For a pharmacist, it's a valuable tool. So there's not just a general time suck rule that this is a time suck and this isn't. It varies from business to business. But you want to know where yours are. Then you want to know what your people are doing. And this can sound a little micromanagey, and a lot of this presentation might sound like I'm asking you to micromanage people, and I'm not. Please don't. I'm not asking you to micromanage people, and you don't want to give your employees the impression that you're micromanaging them, and you really don't want to micromanage them. Please don't. But it allows you to know what people are actually doing. A few years ago, I ran layoffs for a large pharmaceutical company, and we were in the process of outsourcing a lot of HR functions. All of a sudden, my job appeared on the outsourcing list. Now, I had been actively involved in this outsourcing, and so I went to my boss and I said, they are handling transactional things. This isn't transactional. How did I get on this list? And she said, well, the head of HR put you on there. Not me, but the job. Anyway, so I had to figure out why, and I knew that the outsourcer wasn't capable of doing what I did. So a little digging, a little talking, and it come to find out that the head of HR, all she saw with the layoffs was the end package with all the paperwork that we handed to an employee. She thought I was sitting at a desk hitting print and stuffing paper into envelopes. Now, of course, an outsourcer can do that, right? Totally easy for an outsourcer to do that. You could hire a temp to hit print and stuff things in envelopes. What she didn't know, because nobody had kept track of what I did from day to day, was that I was writing the documents. I was training managers how to tell someone they were laid off. I was consulting with benefits providers. I was acting as a liaison between the terminated employees and the benefits providers. I was doing all of these high-level tasks, but she could only see the paper in the envelope. Now, fortunately, because I was involved in the outsourcing, I saw that position on the list. I was able to get a real job description given, and the outsourcer actually said, no, we won't do this, once they saw what it really was, and then my position was secure. Whew. Time tracking saved my job. And then I quit anyway. But time tracking was really important in that situation. The head of HR didn't know, and it wasn't because she wasn't intelligent, it wasn't because she wasn't caring, it wasn't because she didn't want a good organization. It was that this was a major company with 500 HR people. She's looking down a list based on my job title. That's what she assumed that I did. So if she'd had data that showed what I was actually doing, I doubt that position would have ended up on the list to begin with. This is one of the reasons why you really want to know. And you have probably seen this happen before when somebody quits and all of a sudden things fall apart because nobody knows what they actually do. Another very, very important thing is how long processes really take. We often think we know how long something is going to take, and we often overestimate how much time it will take us to do something and underestimate how long it will take the neighboring department to do something. So we're willing to say, oh, it will only take payroll a couple of hours to implement all of those pay increases for year end. But it's going to take me 6 weeks to run the year-end performance appraisal and salary increase program. When in reality, it might take you 4 weeks to run that, and it might take payroll a week to do the changes, depending on your systems and all that, just random numbers out there. But time tracking can help you know how long it really did take last year, or how long a similar process took, so that when you're planning for the upcoming year, you can make better decisions. You can assign the right number of people to things, you can build your timelines more easily, and you can be more prepared. These things really help the business to stay on target and to meet your budgets. It's data that can help. Time tracking can also help you cut unnecessary things. This goes along with our time sucks that we talked about earlier. Things that don't bring any value need to be cut out from your organization. And you may think, nope, we're running lean, we're awesome, and you're not. I can guarantee it. There are things that are unnecessary. One of my favorite unnecessary stories, or I guess I should say one of the most horrifying unnecessary stories, comes from 2017 in the United States. So when the new Trump administration took over, they said they're going to cut regulation. That sounds great. Let's cut regulation. Let's cut things that are silly. One of the things that they found in 2017, that there was a regular report being produced that was supposed to show the predicted outcomes of Y2K. Now, if you're young, you might not remember, everybody was in a panic when the calendar was going to change from 1999 to 2000, and we were all concerned that all the computers in the world were going to fail. So this was a good thing for the federal government to track, but for some reason, it still got left on the list of regular reports. And 17 years after the calendars changed from 1999 to 2000, they were still doing this report. You may have something like that. Now, I'm sure that none of your businesses are as incompetent as the federal government, but as the US federal government, I'm not saying anything about any other country's federal government, but there are things like that in your business. Somebody started a report 10 years ago, it goes out every week, nobody uses it. Somebody has been doing, regular client updates or weekly planning meetings or whatever it is. Time tracking can help you cut down on these things and cut them out. It can also help you to maximize your productivity. What things really, really help you get success? When people are spending their time doing task A, do you see a better return on your investment than when they spend a time doing task B? When you communicate with clients via email, is that more effective than face-to-face meetings or vice versa? You can actually see how these things go and what works for your business. And I really want to emphasize the your business thing. One of the things I've learned as an American living in Switzerland is that culture plays a huge role, a huge role. When I'm dealing with Americans, it is email, text, they love it. When I'm dealing with Swiss people, they want a phone call. I'm not nearly as productive in Switzerland if I write emails than I am if I make a phone call. It's cultural. Your business has its own culture. Your clients have their own culture. So you want to make sure that you're maximizing the productivity for your business. And all these things sound awesome, and they are. And like I said, I love data. I'm a data person, and it's great. But there are downsides to time tracking, big ones, and not just my husband's complaining about his time tracking software. If you're not doing a job that requires billable hours, like if you're a consultant or an attorney or an accountant or whatever, somebody that bills like that, people are going to resent it. They're totally going to resent having to keep track of what they have to do. And it will seem like micromanaging. And if you do this wrong, it will be like micromanaging. And that can be quite depressing for your employees because you don't want them to feel like you're always watching over them, that you're going to come up and be like, I see that you spent 7 less hours this week on client work than you did last week. And why is that? What's wrong? And it can just drive you nuts. And you want to say, look, I landed this account. I'm awesome. Go away. So there is this thing where you don't want to be micromanaging, and this can really seem like it when you're tracking hours. And then you have the problem of how do you track hours on creative things? Most of my job right now is creative. I give speeches, I write articles, I give presentations, and a lot of that involves thinking. Thinking while I'm doing the dishes. Do I record that if I'm doing time tracking? Thinking while I'm on the tram or the bus. Thinking while I'm playing Monopoly, which is a game that never ends, and my son loves it. And I think about work while he's winning. And maybe if I stop thinking about work, he might not win every time, but he always wins. Anyway, how do you track those hours? And don't say, I don't do creative work. I'm willing to bet every one of you on this call has problem solving as part of your job. This is an HR job for sure, problem solving. It is a payroll job for sure. People see these jobs as transactional from time to time, but they are mainly problem solving. Problem solving in and of itself is creative. You may solve that in the middle of the night. How do you track those hours? And the answer is you can't. So there's always going to be things that you leave out when you are doing time tracking. And other things that seem funny. You say, I don't want any of my employees spending time surfing the internet when they should be working. I want them to be 100% on task all of the time. But if you're trying to come up with a solution to something, sometimes letting your brain relax and watching YouTube videos or surfing Facebook can actually spark an idea in your head. So is that being productive, even though it doesn't look like it's productive? It can be. And that makes this time tracking kind of difficult for our knowledge workers. Again, back when we were just all factory workers, it was how many widgets got made, done and done. But in the business world, data is king. And within human resources, over the time I've been in HR and HR functions for the last 20 years, we've gone from data is this minor little thing to data is central. And data is the language of business. And if we want to be heard and understood, if we want what we like to call our seat at the table, we need the data to support what we want to do. If we don't have that, the rest of the business will ignore you. Even if you can get your chief human resources officer to report directly to the CEO and sit down at the executive table, if she can't speak a language that manufacturing and marketing and finance understand, which is numbers and data, they're not going to listen to anything she has to say. So it's very important that we have this data. So we're going to talk a little bit about best practices for tracking. Our first thing, don't data mine. And data mining, if you never took a statistics class, you might not know what this is. But this is where you take your data and you start running things on it. Maybe you're running correlations. Maybe you're sorting and looking at, the oldest employee versus the youngest employee, and you're just looking at things, trying to see if something comes up. This is a lot of fun, and it's fun to play with data, but it can cause false things to come up. I'm sure you've seen the charts on the internet of, the correlation between number of umbrellas sold and, Kevin Bacon movies or whatever. There's no cause and effect between those things, but they are correlated. That can happen within your data too. So every good data person will tell you, if you talk to a statistician or a researcher of some sort that uses statistics, they'll tell you you need to have a goal for your data before you start playing with it, before you start looking at it, before you even start to collect it. You need to ask yourself, what problem are you trying to solve? Do you feel like your business is understaffed and overworked? I find that many businesses feel this way. We have too much work and not enough staff. So let's figure out how we can make that better. That's your goals that you're starting with your data collection. Do you have projects that are running off schedule? We've scheduled 3 weeks for this. It took 4. We have this deadline coming up, and so now everyone is having to work till midnight every night the week before the project is due to get it done on time. These types of things are problems that you're trying to solve. Another one is your distribution of workload. Is one group spending a lot of time running around like crazy with this tremendous amount of work, and another group is kicking around the break room watching those cat videos, which maybe they are being productive depending on what they do. One of these 3 questions are things that frequently come up. You've probably asked yourselves all 3 of these questions. So these problems are ones that you may want to solve. Once you've picked your problem that you want to solve, then you want to go on to step 2. You want to pick the least intrusive way to gather your data. Remember how I said that employees hate time tracking, they hate recording their time, they hate the feeling of being micromanaged? This is why you want to go with the least intrusive way to gather your data. Consultants, lawyers, they record their time in 7 to 15-minute intervals. Your in-house staff won't like that. They will not see a point to it. And honestly, I don't see a point to it either. That level of detail won't give you enough additional data to be worth the pain. And if you're not billing at that level, you don't need to do it. If you're going to record time, you're also going to need to provide the training to people so that they know how to do it. And this is not just training on to how to enter information into your system. This is also what counts as what. What is admin time? What is project time? How do I count it if I've been working on a spreadsheet for client A and then I take a phone call for client B? How do I record that time? All of these things are internal questions that you need to answer, and you need to be prepared to train, and you need to have a subject matter expert that can field questions on this. It's important that you're clear because otherwise your data won't mean anything. If John is saying that every time he goes to a meeting, that's administration time, and Jane is recording her meetings based on what projects are discussed, it's going to look like Jane is a lot more productive than John, that John is simply doing all this admin work and Jane is working with clients. When in reality, they're both sitting in the same meeting, but you haven't been clear on what you mean for what. So make sure that you have training that goes into this. And here's how you can do it. First, you can have manual collection. You can just ask. This isn't perfect, but if you want to see how much your salaried staff is working, ask them. Ask people if they feel overwhelmed. They will tell you. If you walk up to somebody and ask them if they feel like their job is overwhelming, they will tell you yes, if it really is. People tend to be honest about this, unless you also are looking like you might want to fire someone. Don't do that. But if you have a good relationship with your people and you ask if they're overwhelmed, they'll let you know. Ask people what projects are consuming the most of their time. They know better than their managers do. Sometimes we rely directly on managers too much. And the problem with that is that managers of good employees know less about what their employees do than managers of bad employees. Bad employees need the micromanaging and the hand-holding, and so their manager knows precisely what's going on. If you're a good employee, you go in, you get your work done, you make your decisions on your own, and only come to your boss from time to time. So if you just go to the managers, you'll get a skewed answer because they'll be focused on the things on the problems and not on the day-to-day stuff that just gets done. Ask people to rank their projects by importance and estimate the amount of time that they spend on each. If there's a mismatch there, you already know there's a problem. Oh, I spend forever doing X, but Y is our most important project. If you hear that, you know that there's a mismatch and you can start to work on that. This manual collection can be done one time, and then you can work on a plan to fix it. It's easy, it's not intrusive. It also doesn't give you precise data, but depending on what problem you're trying to solve, this may actually solve it for you. And it's not so bad to do. Then comes the software. And I only have 3 data software solutions here. And let me tell you, there are literally hundreds out there. So there are different things for every business and everything that you need. We're going to talk a little bit about each of these 3, just because these 3 represent the extremes of the timekeeping world. First, of course, we have Beebole, our lovely sponsors, and they're awesome, of course, because they're sponsoring this, which makes them awesome. Plus, their software is pretty awesome. But their focus on time tracking and reporting, and their reporting tools are really what makes a difference and makes them stand out. It's not only time and attendance, but it allows you to really dig down into the data and figures and figure out how your time is used. We're going to talk a little bit about some of their reports and reports in general in a few minutes, but they focus also on small, medium, and large size businesses. The next company is Toggle. And this software focuses on tracking individual tasks. How long did you spend on that spreadsheet? How long did you spend Googling for an answer? How long did you spend on that telephone call or in that meeting? So it's really something that consultants like to use, individuals, people that are trying to figure out how to make their days more productive. It's not really designed for big businesses or even medium-sized businesses. It's really for figuring out actual tasks and not so much for the productivity. But it's very popular and very effective for the independent consultant crowd. It's very good at what it does. Then we have Workday, which is a big player. And you've probably heard of Workday. You may use Workday. It's designed for larger companies. Matter of fact, if you look on their website, it asks you to pick your company size, and the company options are like large and larger. If you're a small business, this isn't the software for you. It is also can be done as an enterprise software and connected with your finance software. That's great. These things are really handy, and I really like being able to connect my people data with my finance data, because that's one of the ways that I can bring information to senior leadership and speak the language that they understand. They want to know not just how many hours are spent on things, but they want to know profits and costs per project or per client. They want to know about the billable hours ratio and the percentages that are important to them. These are things that they like. This can be a great tool for that. All of these softwares and the other ones that we're not mentioning all have great things. And if you're looking for software, I don't want you to just pick out of a hat. Look for something that really, really meets your needs, depending on what your business is. You have the data. If you have a system, you're going to have data. And actually, you all have data now, unless you are keeping your employee records on index cards and shoeboxes, which I swear, my very first HR job in 1999, that's how they kept their employee files. They were in shoeboxes. And this was a company with 1,200 people in it. So we've come a long way. I really hope none of you have your employee files in shoeboxes, and I hope you all at least have an Excel spreadsheet. But I'm assuming that you all have some sort of HR system. You have data. And so it's fun to play with it. It's fun to look at, but you need to share your results. You need to be able to go to other people and explain what's going on with the people. In human resources, we are the experts on people, just like the marketing people are the experts on marketing, and the finance people are the experts on money. And nobody has any problem with them speaking up about their levels of expertise. But we are the experts on people. And with that, we need to show the same interest, the same data that they have on their areas of interest. We need to be able to show how things make a difference. Do we have a good return on investment with our training courses? This is something you can do with your time tracking. You can show that employees that you send to this training course end up being more productive. These are hard numbers that people want to hear and are excited about. You need to do something with the data. You need to create action items. Then we need to identify areas that need fixing. And every company, every department has things that can run better. Everything needs fixing. Not saying you should just rip everything down and start over again, but there are things that need fixing. You need to ask for input for fixing. If you walk in as the HR person, throw down a report and say to a manager, look, I've noticed I've identified these time sucks. I want you to cut them out, and then walk off, you're not going to be the most favorite person. You have to understand there are politics, there are histories, there are projects that are people's special babies. And if you don't approach it in the right way, they're not going to listen to you. So you need to ask for input for fixing things. You need to help evaluate the options. And then you need to try new things with no consequences. And of course, you can't ever do anything with zero consequences because everything we do has some sort of consequence. But what I'm talking about here is that we need to not be scared to try new things. Employees need the opportunity to take risks. We don't succeed if we can't have the opportunity to fail. And so often we punish failure so much that we discourage any risk taking. So we prevent people from actually succeeding by punishing failure to the extreme. Now, of course, there are some things where failure is completely and totally a disaster for the company. But for many things, you can run trials on things, see how things work. So you gather your data and you find out that everybody's spending a lot of times in these status update meetings, and say, okay, we're going to cut the number of these status meetings in half and see what happens. Is it possible that people's productivity will go up after that? Absolutely. They're no longer doing that time suck. Is it possible that their productivity will drop after that because they're no longer getting the information that they actually needed? That's also possible. Less likely. Most meetings, I think, are a waste of time, except for this one. This is a great meeting, not a waste of time. But you won't know unless you try, and you have to be willing to make that leap of faith and give it a try, make a change. And if it doesn't work out, then go back to the old way. That's easy enough to do. So give it a try. Make sure that employees understand that this company, your company, rewards risk taking, even if it doesn't always play out. This will help you fix more things. When you implement your changes, you don't stop there. Just like I said, when you get rid of your or cut your status meetings in half, you then want to see what that impact really was. You want to reevaluate. You want to recollect your data. And depending on your system and what your needs are, that may mean just continuing to track things in the system and then looking back at the data 6 months later. If you're checking data manually, it may mean running a survey in 6 months and asking the people again. You want to find out, are things better, worse, or the same? And if they're better, great. If they're worse, why are they worse? Are they worse because the changes weren't good, or are they worse because people rejected the change? I have seen people totally and completely reject changes. We had a situation where I was working in an HRIS and we implemented a new HRIS system. That's redundant, a new human resources information system. And one of our sites hated it, hated it, hated it, hated it. And so what they started to do was use their old system and the new system at the same time. So they would enter the data into one system and then enter it into the other system. As you can imagine, their productivity fell. Now, if you say, look, we've implemented this new system and suddenly this site's productivity is failing, it must be the new system. No, what it really was is that they were doing twice the work to enter the data into both systems. So make sure when if you find out something is worse, what the real cause is, what's really going on. It may not be your change, it may be people rebelling against your change. I hope you don't ever have that problem, but people hate change. And I love other people to change. I don't like to change myself, so I totally understand that. But you want to do this. And when you have done this, and when you have solved the problem that you set out to solve, then I want you to walk away. And this can sound so hard because you love data. You're here because you love data, right? You love being able to know what's going on. You love to have accurate records. And there are so many things that is great. But unless the data is super easy to collect, you don't probably need it forever. Just because you have it, it doesn't mean it's worth the time, effort, and money. If there's not a specific goal that the employees understand, it's probably not worth your time. And I want you to think about that. You may like to use reports and you may think it's really great, but if the employees can't understand why they are doing the work to keep track of what they're doing during the day and to keep track of how long they're spending on projects, then it's not going to be worth it. If you can't clearly articulate why things are the way they are, it's probably not worth your time. And it pains me to say that because, as I said, I love data. I love it. It's the best. But sometimes it's time to walk away from it and come back in a year and run the test again and see how things are going, see if you've improved. Now, of course, if it's easy to collect, or if you've got an hourly paid workforce that is clocking in and clocking out and those types of things, it's going to be easy to keep doing that and go ahead and do it. But if it's tedious and difficult for the employees, walk away for a season and see what happens. I want to take a couple looks at a couple reports. These are from Beebole that they have kindly given to me. And this one is my favorite. Start with my favorite. And this is an on-time report. And you may think, oh, yeah, it's important that people show up to work on time. But that is not what this is. This is people submitting their time tracking data on time. And as someone that loves data, makes me happy. But the thing that makes me happiest about it is it's not just a report that says who did it on time, that Beebole has set up a system where you can set it so that people receive rewards for getting their reports in on time. Because one of the most difficult things about time tracking is getting your people to comply with it and to actually turn in the dumb things and to log into the system and put the information in, because they have to do this data entry themselves. So if you have a reward, and this will let you know what your reward is, then you can then offer something. It doesn't have to be big. In fact, big rewards for this type of thing aren't even my cup of tea. Something small, but anyway, something that gives them a carrot instead of a stick, or I prefer to say a brownie instead of a stick, because who wants a carrot? So that's what we're going to say from now on, a brownie instead of a stick. This is what this does, and I love it. The other thing that I really like, and I don't know who made this report, but I like the names they've chosen here. Bertram Copper, Don Draper, and Joan Harris. Excellent, excellent. Got our Mad Men going on. This is a vacation report. And the reason why I love this is because I love work-life balance. And I think work-life balance is really, really important. And if you have people who aren't using their vacation, you're in risk of them becoming burned out. And so you can go in and see who is going on vacation and who is not. And a lot of managers do this from a punitive standpoint and saying, oh, you're almost out of vacation, you need to come into the office more. But I look at it from the other side of things and say, you haven't taken enough vacation days yet this year. Let's get going. Let's get out of the office. We want to make sure that you've done that, because it's important. And I'll bet with your fancy time tracking tools that you'll be able to go back and do a correlation and see about the productivity of people that actually take time off. And I would believe that you will see better productivity from people who take a break from time to time, as compared to people that just work, 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 work. this kind of thing can really help you with that. So these are just a couple of reports. There's, naturally a zillion more available to you from Beebole or from whatever software you choose. But it's important that you use them and that you take advantage of those things and make a difference in your employee's life. And making a difference means you've got to be the cheerleader. And by cheerleader, I don't mean you have to be super hyper and excited, but you need to make sure that your staff understands. Data collection is always going to be a burden, and it's the staff that has to take that burden on. They're going to see it as part of their workday, and if they're feeling overwhelmed to begin with, it's going to be difficult. So you have to be a cheerleader, and you need to share back the information with them. You need to let them know how things are being used and what changes you're making because of it. If you've just collected the data but never come back to the employees and say, this is what we've learned, they're going to resent it. But if you can come back and say, look, this is what we found, and these are the changes that we're going to make, or this is what we found, and we see you guys are awesome, and we're so excited about the work that you're doing. These things make a difference. It's really important that you be positive about these things, and it will help you with your data collection. It also makes for a better work environment, which also increases employee engagement and employee productivity, which is the goal of every HR person on the planet, right? We want engaged, happy employees. We want great retention. We want our staff to be developed. All of these tools can help. So, this is how time tracking can help you achieve your dreams. I don't know, dreams, HR dreams, and make your business a better place. Thanks. So if people have questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suzanne. I do think I might be having a couple problems with my audio, so we do have a few questions here, but that I will go ahead and read to you, but if you don't mind just repeating back a little bit so that we can make sure that people understand clearly what the question is, that would be great. So the first question is, you mentioned that, it's really important to let employees know that time tracking isn't about controlling them, but rather about answering, and kind of resolving the very specific needs of the company. Do you have any tips or best practices for this in terms of how you can really transmit this to employees?
Yes. The first thing is let them be part of the discussion behind it. Let them give their suggestions because they want a better workforce too. So if they're coming at you saying, if you come and say, we want to make this better, what things do you think are problematic? And they may say, we're spending too much time in meetings. Then this is an opportunity to say, let's take a look at this. We're going to use time tracking to track how much time you're spending in meetings versus how much time you're doing other things. And this really gives the employee a feeling that, oh, you're listening to me, you're listening to my concerns. And of course, not every employee will have the same concern, but if you get some ideas directly from the employees and you can relate those back, then people are far more likely to do it. Another thing which is so critical is that within a department, you don't exempt the boss. I have seen companies do this where they're like, directors, we're not going to track, but everybody lower, we're going to track their time. And then everybody that has to track feels like they're, in second grade again. And the teacher doesn't have to do it. And that's not what it is. That's not looking at your company's productivity. If you're going to do it, and you don't have to do it for the whole company at once, of course, you're tackling different problems. Make sure that the boss is doing it, and the boss needs to be on board and be positive, and the cheerleader too.
Great. Another thing you mentioned is the importance of being transparent about the data that's collected, sharing with employees whenever possible. Would you recommend there being some sort of a transparency policy that's shared as kind of part of the corporate culture? Or are there any specific maybe reports or KPIs that you think are particularly valuable to share with employees, maybe more than others?
I think with employees, a lot of this, of course, is business specific and culture specific. I am a huge fan of openness, but some people think my openness can become crazy because I want everybody to know everybody else's salaries, which most HR people freak out when I say that. So I'm really far on the openness scale. But I think it's really important to show reports that show change, and that makes a difference to people. So if you just show a report on, this is the number of hours people spend in meetings, or this is our level of productivity, that's boring. But if you can show the difference, look, we implemented this program and this is what changed. And the important thing here is to show when it was bad and when it was good. We have this instinct to hide the bad, because we're embarrassed and a failure, and we don't want people to know. But if you show the bad, people will know you're going to be honest with them, so that when you come back with the good, they believe what you're saying, and they're not like, oh, they're manipulating the data to get their special project passed. They know you're being honest. As for policies, I mean, there's always data privacy issues that we have to deal with. So you want to make sure that your data, anything that you're sharing with employees, is generalized and not being able to drill down to the individual employee level, unless you're crazy like I am and want everybody to know everything. But I admit to being crazy on that. You want to make sure that you're in compliance with all privacy rules on things. So keep that in mind if you're developing a policy, and that's going to change drastically. The European listeners have a lot more restrictions on data privacy than the American listeners on this webinar. The laws are just incredibly different. So make sure that your policy covers all data privacy issues.
Great. The last question we have here is, you said don't be afraid of running trials and with different tools with employees and letting them test things out. So would you recommend running these trials or tests with kind of beta groups, or maybe with like specific smaller teams? Or do you think the best practice is to kind of just dive right in and let all of your employees experience a tool? And if you do use beta groups or certain teams, how do you go about choosing them?
That's an excellent question. And of course, the answer is going to depend on your company and the size of your company. If you have 100 employees, it's going to be different than if you have 10,000 employees. But if you have a really large company, if you have 10,000 people, it absolutely makes sense to do beta testing, because a lot of this can be time consuming and it can be costly, not just for the software, but the time they spend doing it. So there is a lot of sense in doing that. On how you choose the groups, one thing that I like to look at is the interest of the leadership, because their interest is going to have a huge impact on the outcome. And when you're doing a beta test, you literally aren't sure what's going to happen. I mean, you have some ideas because you're smart and you've seen things in the past, but it could fail miserably. So if you have the director that really hates this idea, that's not what you want to have your beta testing on. If you have the person that is super excited about it, that's the person that you want to be on that. Also on things that you think can be the best impact. Because if it works, if your testing works and things change, that group can really lead the company. On the other hand, if it fails, it can have a bigger impact. So you really need to look at that. But my big thing is to make sure that the head of the group is the person is on board and can be your cheerleader with you.
Great. Christina asks, how do you think is the best way to share data collection with your employees? Would you recommend through email or a face-to-face meeting?
I think it's going to depend a lot on your culture. And like I mentioned earlier, the difference between my homegrown American culture and the Swiss culture that I live in is such that here I would definitely do a meeting. People don't like email for whatever reason. They don't. So I would definitely want to do a face-to-face meeting. In a different company, different culture, I might want to do things via email, or I might want to do things both. yesterday I was having a conversation with an HR manager who was going through insurance open enrollment in the United States, which is a huge pain in the neck. And she was complaining that a lot of her employees are not responding. And she's she runs a, she doesn't run, she's the HR manager for a manufacturing site. And I said, well, do your manufacturing employees have company issued computers? And she said, no. And I said, so you mean they have to go home from work, log onto the company website to do this? And she said, yes. And I said, there's your problem. You're treating your corporate sitting behind the desk employees the same as your factory employees, and they have very different needs. So depending on what your needs are, it's going to vary from company to company. I like to do everything as possible via email. I'm a huge fan, but not everybody is. You're going to know your company and your environment. What have people responded to well in the past?
Okay, great. So one more question. When it comes to KPIs, if you've collected your data, you have your reports, particularly as you mentioned on Beebole. I mean, we do offer a lot of different types of reports. Do you think that less is more? Do you think there's a limit to KPIs? How do you kind of mark that limit of when maybe too much is being tracked?
Yeah, there is that. I mean, you can do so much, time spent per client, time spent per project, time spent per task, profits and costs per project, profit and costs per client, operating margins, billable ratios, budget status. I can go on. You can get to data overkill. And when you do that, then you get paralyzed. So the question I always like to go back to is, what problem are you trying to solve? And if you can't answer that question, then set your data down and walk away for a little bit and figure out what problem you're trying to solve. And when you figure out that problem, those are the KPIs you want to focus on for the time being. And if it's possible, when you get it all fixed, then you can move on to something else. But that's how I recommend making the choice. Pick your problem that you want to solve.
Great, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. It was fantastic. And we just wanted to remind everybody also that as long as you registered for the webinar, if you showed up late, we're going to be sending out an email of the full recording tomorrow that you can share with your teams, that you can go over. And also, if you're looking over your notes and you come up with any questions later on, feel free to tweet at us at Beebole, or you can also tweet at Suzanne at Real Evil HR Lady, or you could use the hashtag HRBIwebinar. So thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you to everybody who attended, and everyone have a good day.